Writing section, write essay guided practice. Let's begin this session. I'll give you an essay topic. You will have to write a response in 20 minutes. The way we can go about this is, once you see the essay topic, pause this lecture video for 20 minutes. And in those 20 minutes, try to write a response and then come back after 20 minutes and resume the video from that point. Make sure that you don't give yourself any more than 20 minutes because this is real exam practice and I want you to give yourself exactly the same conditions that you will get in the exam. So let's begin. Here's your first essay topic. Now you can pause and come back and resume after 20 minutes. All right, welcome back. I hope you have been able to write a good response to this in 20 minutes. Let's have a look at a sample essay. Whether an upsurge in international travel in recent decades has offered greater upsides than drawbacks is a matter of discussion, with many people claiming that the demerits of this trend outweigh its merits. However, I do not entirely accept this, and I'll explain why in this essay. Now, this essay was related to new airlines, cheaper flights, and the consequent increase in international travel, and whether that has more advantages or disadvantages. So now let's try to analyze this in a step-by-step manner. The first thing that you have to do when you get an essay topic is you have to read and understand the prompt. So here there are 4 sentences in the prompt. The first one is new airlines and cheaper flights have led to an increase in international travel. So they make a statement that new airlines and cheaper flights have led to an increase in international travel. However, there is a view that increased travel between countries has more disadvantages than advantages. And now they're putting forward a view that this increased travel has more disadvantages than advantages. And the question then that is posed to you is, do you agree or disagree with this notion? Which notion? That there are more disadvantages than advantages. So do you agree or disagree? You have to write an essay explaining that with the help of suitable arguments. Okay. So when you are understanding, trying to analyze the prompt and trying to figure out what you have to do, each sentence is important. For example, if you just look at, there's a view that increased travel between countries has more disadvantages than advantages. Do you agree or disagree? Somebody can just focus on this. But we also need to acknowledge the fact or consider the fact that why the travel has increased. New airlines and cheaper flights. Now, after this, you decide your position. Do you agree that there are more disadvantages or do you disagree and you think that there are more advantages to this? In this sample response, the person who has written this response does not agree, thinks that there are more advantages than disadvantages and therefore does not agree with this view, with this notion, that is, disagrees with this notion. So that means he will write arguments, he will put forward arguments which show that increased travel has more advantages than disadvantages. All right. Now you try to think of some key points to support this argument. If we are saying that it has more advantages, then in your mind, try to think what happens when you travel. What are the benefits of it? So one is that it increases the worldview. It helps understand other cultures. It provides a better understanding of the world. So sort of helps the world live in peace with each other together. Then increased travel, it also leads to more tourism, more opportunities. And when people go to other countries, they often come across opportunities for trade, for business. So that's why there are a lot of benefits. And for your essay, you only need to pick 2 or 3 points because those 2 or 3 points, they'll be sufficient to meet the word requirement. Provided you elaborate those points fully, you explain the argument, and then you also try to add an example or a couple of examples there. After that, we recommend a 4-paragraph structure. So once you have the points ready, then you can start with writing a skeleton in the first paragraph. This is how I'll begin my introduction. Then in the second paragraph, just write a few words of the first point, a few words of the second point. Then in the next paragraph, write a few words about the third point. And finally, how you're going to conclude it. Then come back to it and you can expand each of those placeholders that you have put in the structure. So now here, when you are making an introduction, the purpose of the introduction is to show that you understand what you have been asked to write about, and then also to declare your position on that topic. For example, here the writer opens by saying that whether an upsurge in international travel in recent decades has offered greater upsides than drawbacks is a matter of discussion, with many people claiming that the demerits of this trend outweigh its merits. And then puts forward his position or her position that, however, I do not accept this, and I will explain why in this essay. You don't always have to say, however, I agree, however, I disagree. You can state that in other ways. For example, as said here, however, I do not entirely accept this. All right. There are many ways that you can write an introduction because it's just sort of opening up and easing somebody into the topic. So an introduction, it could be like a blanket statement on international travel. For example, you can start by saying that international travel is a dream for everyone in the world. And in the recent decades, due to new airlines and cheaper flights, most people have been able to avail of international travel. However, many people think that this has many drawbacks, but I do not agree with that, and I'll explain why in this essay. So you see, there are many ways to write an introduction. It should just be somewhat connected to the main topic, which is like international travel. So just write any statement that comes to your mind and then acknowledge what you have been asked to, that you have been asked to give opinion on whether it has advantages or disadvantages. And finally, you explain what your stand is, that you do not entirely accept this, and that's what you will explain in the essay. Now, after that, you start explaining your points. And there are, again, when you start an essay, when you start explaining something, you don't straight away start with the point. You can say, first of all, I would like to discuss. And after that, in addition. So you have to build upon one argument over another argument. And a good way to start talking about your arguments, start putting forward your arguments is either you start like this, that there is a myriad of arguments in favor of my stance, or you can just start by saying that first of all, I would like to talk about, and then you can add your point. That first of all, I would like to talk about that increased international travel results in an increased number of tourists who spend money on food, accommodation, etc., etc. So that's the first point. And then the second point, they're talking about foreign entrepreneurs who can collaborate with local counterparts and results in more investment. Needless to say, all these factors lead to economic prosperity fueled by an increase in travel and tourism. And then you can give an example. For example, maybe you can give an example of travel to Asian countries. That in the recent years, travel to Cambodia, travel to Vietnam has opened up many new opportunities for people in those countries. So you can support it with an example. However, if you have explained it fully, then an example is not always necessary. But let's say you want to meet the word requirement and you sort of looking for what to write. Then an example is because you can always make up an example. The computer is not going to verify whether what you're saying is true or false as long as it sounds logical. So you can put an example like that. Some people, what they do is they make up statements like, according to a recent research article published by Harvard University, the developing countries have seen foreign investment of over $300 billion due to increased international travel. Now, PTE, it can only understand your structure, sentences, grammar, and English, but it can't go and verify whether Howard really did that research and whether the figure of 300 billion is correct or not. So what I'm trying to say is that if you run out of words, if you are thinking of what to write about, then you can make up some examples. Then next, when you have to add another point, you can start by saying furthermore. So further to the previous, there's more. So that's furthermore. Or you can say in addition, or you can say not just that, but however, if the argument that you're making is now against what you have earlier discussed, now it's on the other side, then you can say however, because you're going to present the opposite picture now. So always try to understand what's the link between the arguments that you are presenting and then use those corresponding, the correct linking words there. There is a session you will find where we discuss what are these appropriate linking words that you can use. So read that to refresh those concepts. But I think with the help of this example also, now you can see how we put that into practice. And finally, in the end, you can say something like, in view of the arguments outlined above, or to conclude. And a conclusion is basically you repeat, you re-emphasize what you have earlier said. So one can conclude that despite some concerns, the role of increased travel is instrumental, indeed, not only in helping the local economy to thrive, but also in providing an exposure to diverse cultural values and ideologies. So you've sort of summed up your position again in the end. And that's basically what the conclusion is. It's a recap of what you have done earlier. There's also a session where we discuss some templates. So let's say you really struggle with writing essays and you only want a medium level score, maybe 60 points or so, then you can use the templates. But if you are aiming for a high score, then I would advise you that you follow the proper method that we have discussed and try to be original in what you write. Because the responses written using essays that you write using templates, they always sound like as if they have been written using templates. And the computer, it can tell that. So you'll never get the same level of marks that you get if you write an original essay. Of course, following the structure, taking care of all the linking words, using the right kind of language, it will always get you a better score compared to you sort of give a ready-made response based upon your templates. All right, so now when you have written this essay, the last thing that you should do, you have to review and improve. So if you find yourself repeating the same words again and again, then you can change. You can write a synonym or you can rephrase something. As you have probably noticed in this introduction here, upsurge in international travel in recent decades has offered greater upsides than drawbacks. So the writer here has not used the same vocabulary as was there in the prompt. So has not mentioned advantages or disadvantages even once. Instead of that, she has mentioned upsides and drawbacks. And instead of increase, has mentioned upsurge. So look at that and these opportunities where if there is a simple word, try to find a better counterpart, try to find a better synonym, more suitable synonym if you can. For example, on a range of projects, investing on a variety of projects. So there are opportunities. If you think that I've already used the word range a couple of times, and you can, in another place, you can use the word variety in its place. Then look at how you are transitioning from one sentence to another and one paragraph to another. Are you using the right kind of linking words? Also, another thing which you have to do and that you have to do while you are constructing the response, keep an eye on, keep checking, am I writing in the right direction? Am I still answering to the prompt? Because a lot of times you'll find that you are sort of drifting away from the essay topic. Suddenly, instead of talking about advantages and disadvantages of the increased travel, you might start writing something general about international travel. Or I've seen people even, they just get sidetracked and then start writing about airlines and cheaper flights and the benefits of cheaper flights. No, always be clear what you're writing about, and midway, so after you've written a paragraph, just quickly see, okay, have I still written to the point that I was supposed to? Because in the end, if you notice that, it becomes very difficult to change the whole essay. But if you notice it after a few sentences, you can still go back on track. Finally, look for any grammar mistakes or any spelling mistakes. And if you note, find them, then try to correct them. Now, I advise that you leave 2 or 3 minutes in the end for a review. You will find most of the students I've seen, they find like if they spend those 2 or 3 minutes in the end, the essay becomes almost 20 to 30% better than what they have written initially. That's why these reviews are so important in any type of writing and especially academic writing. All right. So what have we learned from this discussion? First, make use of the 20 minutes that are given to you. Leave some time for review in the end. Write as per the structure. Use appropriate transition words from one sentence to another. The transition words or the linking words from sentence to sentence and paragraph to paragraph. The words that show the relationship between the arguments that you're trying to make, and use a variety of vocabulary. Don't repeat the same words again and again. If you find that you are using a simple language, simple words, and if you can think of, then try to replace that with better words, more academically suited words. Take care of these things, and I'm sure you will be writing very good essay responses. Now, let's go to the second question. Are you ready? Here we go. Now, like the previous question, you can pause the video for 20 minutes. Welcome back. I hope you have not given yourself more than 20 minutes and you have been able to write a good essay in these 20 minutes. So here's a sample response for you. The steps, I'll discuss the steps again. And the very first thing that you had to do was to read and understand the prompt. What is the true measure of success? So that's the basic question that's been asked. How do you measure the success? What is the true measure of it? Is success about achieving professional and economic targets? Or is it about the moment spent with family and friends? What's your opinion? Support your answer with suitable arguments. Now, this is the way this prompt has been written. It's very interesting. They started with a very broad topic that what is the true measure of success? You can write anything. Maybe a person can write a whole book on what is the true measure of success. But in the next sentence, they sort of narrow it down. Is it more about professional and economic success, or is it about the time that you spend with family and friends? So now they have narrowed you down that you have to make a comparison between these two to understand. And out of these two, what do you think is the true measure of success? And that is your opinion. So don't just go and start giving an opinion that it's about good exercise, good food, enjoying life, living in every single moment. Okay, it's not that. They have specifically asked you to focus, compare between two things, professional and economic targets, or the time spent with family and friends. So, see, that's why understanding the prompt properly is so important. And we recommend that when you begin writing your essay, the first couple of minutes you spend just on understanding the prompt, and then you decide what your position is. In this case, the writer says that, in my opinion, true success lies somewhere in the middle. So that means she will acknowledge that professional and economic targets, achieving them also makes a person successful. And then, equally important is the time spent with family and friends. And I always believe that writing this middle of the road, kind of taking that position, writing that kind of an essay is easier because it is much easier to come up with 1 point about professional and economic targets and 2 points about family and friends rather than having to come up with 3 points about professional and economic targets. So it just makes it easier. And then it also gives you the opportunity to make a contrast between the arguments, use words like however, that again give you the opportunity to demonstrate that how to use the language to make arguments. All right. Then after that, come up with some points. So in this case, the writer has come up with material needs, the stress of financial burden, keeping an eye on professional growth gives life a target and keeps people motivated and energized. So those points are in favor of chasing the professional and economic success. And then gives the example of business tycoons who lead miserable personal lives and talks about the importance of a loving home environment and the need to strike a balance between these two things. There are, on any topic, I challenge you that if you really put your mind to it, you can come up with dozens of points. So a way to do that is you take the word, so professional and economic targets. When you think of it, what comes to your mind? You think meetings, people working hard, people chasing, people working overtime, people stressed, people making more money, somebody being named employee of the month or employee of the year, getting rewards, falling sick. All of that comes to your mind. See, I've just in 2 seconds, not 2 seconds, in just about 30 seconds, I've come up with 6 or 7 points. And the same way that you can do. Now, if you think about family and friends, so you think about going to movies, you think about relaxation, love, support, mental peace, comfort, feeling of security. So again, it's easy to come up with points. You just let one word lead to another. And once you have the points ready, then again use the 4 paragraph structure. And finally, you come back and do a review in the end. Okay. Here again, I will mention the need to check yourself after every 3, 4 sentences. As I said, these kind of essay topics, they can be confusing. So make sure after every 2 or 3 lines that am I still writing about comparing professional economic targets and family and friends? Or am I just writing about something general about success and enjoying success and the meaning of success, right? If you don't do that, then there's a good chance that you will get sidetracked. And the most points you will get if your your essay is very precise and addresses all aspect of the essay prompt. The last thing that you have to do, you have to review, look for any spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, opportunities to improve language, use better vocabulary. If you can do that, then yeah, you'll do very well. So that was our first guided session on write essay question type. I'll again mention the need for you to do practice on your own in the test software. Make sure you follow all the rules and give yourself only the time that you're supposed to give, that is 20 minutes.